Good afternoon, everybody, and my name is Terry White. Can I welcome you to this Learner-Led Design Across Europe forum? Can I say it's great for you to give your time up. I know everybody is very busy and pressures of work and time at the moment, but we're very pleased to host this because we think it's a topic that we now need to look at very clearly. But can I just say before we start something about the Association for Learning Environments? It's an organization that actually is aiming to develop quality design of learning environments and professional development, but distinctively through communities of educators, researchers, designers, decision makers, and most importantly, young people. And what's distinctive about the way we work is that we're a collaborative, multidisciplinary team that come together across all the disciplines to look at these challenges that we face. And we think there's great strength in that approach. We also believe that learner and stakeholder dialogue need to drive a design process, and that actually, enhancing learning spaces will improve learner outcomes and the life chances of our young people. And that's something which I think we're all very committed to. But central to this, I think, is that advocacy and the engagement of young people in the design process and how that works is central to our mission. And that's very much why we've brought this topic to focus on this afternoon. And my thanks to my colleagues who will be going through this process with you in a moment and introducing their experiences. But just before we do that, can I just say, in terms of the association's work through Europe, it's really great today that with us we have people representing Spain, the UK, Greece, France, Hungary, Italy, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, Ireland. And that's superb that we're developing in that way. But can I especially add that we've got colleagues from North America, from the USA, also part of Association for Learning Environments in those regions, who've come in to join us as well to share what we're talking about and what we're developing. And I think that's a great strength. The focus, I think, then, for us is that we believe young people at the moment are really quite critical. We talk a lot about 21st century learning, but we are actually learning in the 21st century. We're a fifth of the way through. And actually, the importance now, I think, of young people being fully engaged and making decisions about what impacts upon them, I think is a critical factor. And I think we need to continue the work that many colleagues today have been doing over many years, and some more recently, to demonstrate that and to share that. One last point I think for me is of interest. I mean, Stephen will come on in a moment, but I was interested in some of the research that John Hattie had put out a couple of months ago, where he was talking about researching amongst teachers in New South Wales. Large numbers of teachers were asked the question, how much time in a day do you spend talking to your students? Add it all up and tell me what that is. And they came up with a figure of 89% of their time they spent talking to students. So it does rather raise the question to me where the young people are involved in that process and how they should and need to be involved in the dialogue. And that's something that we need to explore as we go through this afternoon. We'll come back at the end, and I now hand over to Stephen to take it further. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks everybody for being here from all over. I see a couple of colleagues I'm in UCJC in Madrid these days, so I see a couple of friends from there, although at the moment I'm in England, of course, and I think wherever you are, in the middle of COVID mayhem of one sort or another, so I'm sitting here with a variety of masks to wear for if anybody comes through the door. I wanted to start with a little bit of just a sense of scale, because I think scale is probably the key thing. It's interesting we're talking about the learners themselves as creators, but the scale is pretty amazing. I think we're getting something like 1 million COVID infections every 3 days around the world. These are gigantic numbers, and we've got 2.2 billion children around the world, which is also a colossal number. But of those 2.2 billion, only about half are having much of an enjoyable education experience, and the the half of those that are having a good, or at least a formal education experience, only about half of them are enjoying it. So even before we got to COVID, there were some imperfections in our learning, and I'm going to come back to that in a bit. But I just think we're at a point when real change is upon us, and interestingly, it's a 75-year cycle. If I think back to around about 1800, doesn't matter where you are in Spain, in England, America, Australia, for that matter, things changed. The Bible schools were Sunday schools. Kids went into church and they had to know the Bible or whatever their particular religion was, and they had church schools. And it took about 75 years before the Industrial Revolution changed everything, really, certainly across Europe. And for that matter, in Australia, it was the gold rush in the 1860s, So what changed was they wanted children who could tell the time, be reasonably punctual, as you've all been today, and could read a bit and could do a bit of number work. And that was necessary for the new industries that had appeared. And then 75 years on from that, we had the devastating, in Europe in particular, World War II. And certainly in England, I had a PhD student, Stan Owers, was evacuated from his home for 3 years. We talk about kids being locked out of school for a month or two, or a week or two, or a term. He was sent away for 3 years to work on a farm in Wales. Didn't see his parents, had to wear a gas mask. Extraordinary stuff, really. But coming out of that war was a sense again that things weren't quite right. People didn't have the knowledge or the qualifications or the capability, the skill sets they needed to be good parents, good citizens, good employees, whatever, And certainly where I live, we had the 1944 Education Act that made compulsory secondary education. So 3 big revolutions, really. And here we are, 75 years on again. And, just look at those numbers again, 2.2 billion children, 1 billion infections, 1 million infections every 3 days, a shared problem around the world. One of the things I've been doing a lot lately is swapping with children the strategies they have for coping with COVID. The one we were looking at the other day in New South Wales, where clearly with COVID you need to open the windows, get the ventilation going, and but in New South Wales they're not allowed to open the windows, because before this crisis there was another crisis which was bushfire. So they have a state legislation says you can't open the windows because of the fires, and they have a current crisis that says you need to open the windows because of COVID. And I probably shouldn't tell you this on the recording, but I had to send them this little kit, which is, I'm sure you know what these are. Some of you will know this. It's a lock picking kit, which you need to be able to unlock the windows, which have been locked down by the state, So don't tell, But it's fascinating, isn't it, that suddenly we're in a very new place, and suddenly education is going to change. And I'll come to that at the end of my 20 minutes. We got 10 minutes of questions, so I hope you got some lined up. So, my lifetime, I'm a professor. I've been a professor for 31 years, goodness knows, a teacher before that. Throughout that, really, I've watched the evolution from education being done for children, with lots of people with good intentions, and then co-construction, let's do it with them. And I think we saw a lot of that. We're seeing some of that even now in the maker movement and so on. But then on to learner-led change, learner-led design, and it does what it says on the tin. We're talking about putting the learners in charge of building better futures. And you think, well, can it change that quickly? Well, let me give you a hint of how quickly it can change. This was Here we go. This is from a United Nations trade paper just the other day, and you can see, they're simply reflecting that retail is changing forever. I like to sort of pop down here and just peer over the top. It's rather good. Retail, of course, is changing forever, and we've seen all sorts of examples of that change. I'll give you one of my favourites here. We have. I wonder if I can find it. Here we are. Is the vicar from my local church, and she has to do blessing people with holy water. So she now comes around with a mask, and a giant water pistol, so she can bless us all at a sensible distance. Don't doubt that the changes you've seen in retail will happen, can happen as quickly in schools. Let's have a little look at an example of some of the numbers on all that. So we did, Lisa and I did a project with a lot of kids in Scotland. I'll pop down again a sec. And we asked them this simple question up here, which is, of the 5 days a week when you would normally go to school, how many days a week do you think you need to go to school to still have that sense of community with your classmates and your peers and your friends? The average, so I'd say, hold up your hands in a Zoom window. The average was that. The average. Nobody said that. And for that to be the average, you can bet a lot said that and some said that. Now, just hang on to that for a moment, because it impacts on everything we're talking about for the rest of this period. Because let's imagine you only need to be in school for half the week. And we've seen very compellingly how children learning from home, we have a lot of nonsense talked in England about catch up, how well the children catch up all the things they've missed out on. And yet, if I look at my little granddaughter here, she spent most of lockdown in a boat sailing. She's got great sailing qualifications. She's picked up qualifications that children of her age wouldn't begin to have, and she doesn't need to catch up. The school needs to catch up with where she is, and that doesn't seem to apply, in a sort of social equity way. I was talking to a parent the other day who said, her kid hadn't done anything the school had sent home at all, and yet he had just replumbed the entire bathroom and was now working on the neighbour's house at 13. So kids exploded off in different directions, and they will do that with the same ingenuity that we brought to our online shopping and our home working. And of course, with so many parents working from home, the need to go to school for childcare has been diminished. Now, I don't want to dwell on this because we don't have a lot of time, but if you just imagine kids only need to come to school for half the week, and I'm working with colleagues, with Fareed there and Enrique, we're currently working on a model which is modeless. You go to school, there is no difference between being at school and being online. You're working with your team, you're doing projects, you're doing project-based learning, you're doing collaborative endeavor. It's stage, not age. It's mixed age work, exactly like every company and most families in the world at the moment. Very few companies have a face-to-face team and an online team. They just happen to be where they are. If the kids only need to come to school for half the week, that means we don't need half the schools we've got, bluntly. And we need the teachers in them, but we don't need the schools. Now, who will choose which schools survive? Oh, it's the children who choose where to go. So full well that we've given a lot of lip service to children designing their own learning. And because you wouldn't be here, that the learning that they design, not because we've asked them their opinion, but because we've said to them, here's the research. Tell us what you would like your school to be like. That the schools that they want are very different to the ones that are being provided in many places, just as the supermarkets that you were offered are very different to the ones that you want. And the Department stores are very different, and in the end, you choose. So I think the 75-year revolution is the locus of control falls absolutely and entirely back to the children. And, there will be a battle for hearts and minds, and people will be telling them all sorts of nonsense about what makes good learning. But they're no fools. They know how good it could be. Let's look at some examples to put some evidence onto that. So here's a school in Essex, and it's been lovely working with. I think there's somebody in the community here from that Essex local authority. Little school, coasting school, wasn't doing fabulously. It's on the coast, like a lot of our coastal schools. It's living on a past glories of a fishing industry, and suddenly now, of course, everybody in the world wants to move there because they're working from home, so they might as well be somewhere nice. So this was a coasting class in a coasting school with an inspirational head teacher, Susie, and we went and we threw absolutely everything at their class, but we did it with them. I remember sitting there and saying to them, so who are the guys in here who, towards lunchtime are kind of losing their concentration and starting to gaze around the room a bit, and they all pointed to one corner, and the boys in the corner were all shamed in their faces, And then I said, so at the end of the day, when the mums have come to collect you, who are the ones who say, I just need to finish this before I go? And they all pointed to another corner, Of course, when we looked at the corner, you could see exactly what was going on. The struggling to concentrate corner was too hot, too dark, way too high levels of CO2, was not a place you could possibly learn for continuously for a morning, simply not possible. The girls over by the window was broken anyway, so loads of fresh air coming in, grey light, fresh air. The sound control was quite good. And of course, so when we swapped the children over, they said, oh, I feel myself turning into the naughty boy corner, and the boys, were saying, oh, okay, well, I think we can hang in here now, So we threw everything at the place, the sound acoustics with echophon, a huge amount of work in taking the bass out. And because we have a lot of cognitive science about all this, we know how to make learning spaces engaging. I do work with the elite sports, and we learn from elite sport that every tiny detail matters. So in the room here, every radical piece of seating, this is from Space Oasis, all the lights, pure, bright, white, Kelvin value over 5,000, lux levels way over 500. I mean, everybody builds to 500 of a minimum. We're aiming for 1,000, and every little detail shining a light onto how good their brains could be, And at the moment, oh, and by the way, when the teacher of the children from the previous year came in to see how things were going in the new classroom, she said, and I quote, if the names weren't the same on the register, I would not even believe it was the same children. So, we know how to make learning astonishing, not just playful and delightful and joyful and engaging, how to make it astonishing. And when we start looking at that with the children, all sorts of things pop up. Here's, I think you can just about see this, but this is, children were saying, well, hang on a minute, we've been measuring the TVOCs in our class. So we, a lot of them use these little anemometer boxes that, that we built, that we've had out there for a long time, They said, well, we've been measuring the TVOCs, and look, suddenly there's an enormous spike in chemical pollution in our classroom. What's going on? And of course, what's going on turned out to be deep cleaning for COVID. So people were getting out, industrial level cleaners, spraying them all over the desks and the walls. And sure, they cleaned the classroom, but sadly, they're also brainwashing the children, So suddenly, you start to realize when you give the kids control of their own data, they start to make really interesting decisions. I'll give you another one to give you a sense of the magnitude of that. This is these are functional MRI scans of children's brains. There's 20 heads aggregated here, 20 here. They're doing a test, and before they do the test, the group over here be told to sit down, have a calm moment, collect your thoughts, do the test. The group over here, keep moving, keep walking around the room, you know, jog around, do what you like, but keep moving, for goodness sake, keep moving. The test starts, they sit down and they start writing. You can see the difference in the brains in terms of their activity. And kids know this, and yet, you know, in a lot of schools, the teachers are saying to them, sit still and don't fidget, sit up straight, which is about the worst thing you can do for getting blood to move around your brain. So there's a mismatch here between the knowledge we have of what makes learning scientifically good, what lets you be your personal best, and what we're expecting children to do in many classrooms, certainly not all classrooms. So that gets to be really exciting, because as we start looking around, then are the opportunity to test children's understanding. This is a design lab we built in UCJC in Madrid, and I think you can see we just asked the children to design a design lab in cardboard. They built the whole thing in cardboard. It was pretty neat, actually. We were pretty pleased with the whole shape of the thing, and then of course we built it. So children's research, students' research in this case, prototyping, testing it out, all based on the data and the researchers out there. We built it, and it's a space we're enormously proud of. When guests come to the university, it's one of the 2 rooms we show them around almost every time. Now, only 2 or 3 minutes left, so let me scamper a little bit, and just to surprise you really. So here's just jumping on whether we need the building at all becomes quite interesting, because when we start trusting children to be part of the learning space that they're in, all sorts of things start to happen. And I'm looking sideways because I'm just searching for an image here of some children. What I've got open on the screen, of course, is the virtual background preferences window, which I'm using as my slide background, if you like. So, you know, here we have a group of children in Islington, and they're in charge of sound. You know, so they are the sound monitors. They've got a decibel meter running here. They're deciding what is too noisy, and then they're interacting with their colleagues and getting the sound down. And the last image I was going to show, which I don't think I've got time to show, but I'm just going to describe, is my own daughter's beach school, which is here on the beach in Essex on the East Coast. Little tiny children, 3 and 4-year-olds, doing full-on scientific research on the marine ecology where they live. Little digital microscopes. They've got, you know, magnifying glasses. They're having the time of their life, rolling around in the mud, and they're just absolutely brilliant. But what's happened is those children have infected the town with learning. And as I walk through the town now in the tourist season, people are all busy catching crabs. It's what they do. It's not, you know, we don't have a nightlife here. We have a pontoon, you know, and so they're all catching crabs, and the kids are pointing. So that's a boy crab. That's a girl crab. Look, that one's. The children are teaching the adults about the marine ecology and science around them, and they're doing it having used the place where they live as their learning space. Now, you know, as we go into COVID, the one thing we know for sure is a group of children enclosed in a closed space is as dangerous as it can be. And that's not going to get any better next year or the year after, because the clue is in the COVID-19. There'll be a COVID-22 and a COVID-39, you know, and so on. So outdoor learning becomes key to all this. And I'll leave you with a thought for now, and then 10 minutes of questions, but I'll leave you with a thought that plan A really is get the children learning in the community, in the space, in the place where they live. There may be times when they need to go indoors to do something, but at the moment, it works the other way around. They do all the learning in the building, and they go out for the climbing wall, they go out for the school garden. They should be out for their learning, not just out of doors, but out in the community, out in the place where they live and they work, infecting their grandparents and parents and friends with lifelong learning. And for me, what happens at this 75-year revolution, the next big one, is that learning escapes from the building, the children escape from the building, the learning escapes from the curriculum, and what we end up with are children who are passionate and really slightly eclectic, rather polymathic learners who can't wait to do more learning. And I think that's where we are. And all those years I've been a prof, I can't remember a more exciting decade ahead. So let's ask me a few questions about that. And then we're going to go on a bit of a tour on what's a really exciting afternoon. So we've got a few questions in the chat room, but I don't know if anybody wants to just chip in. There aren't so many of us. Feel free to ask, really. I mean, you don't have to, but it would be nice.
I have one question, Stephen, if that's okay. I just wondered, with the fact that you feel COVID means that children should be learning more outside, whether you think that might be something that is incorporated in the design of the schools. So instead of designing classrooms that are like a box, having open spaces that are covered so that the elements can't affect the children, but they're getting higher levels of fresh air coming in, they can see nature around them, and biophilic design is having a real impact on their engagement with their classes, and whether that basically that can be incorporated in the renovation or the new designs of schools.
Yeah, I mean, yes to all that, really. But the one thing I would say is, outside is not. I mean, there are exceptions, but most children in most places can learn outside. The beach school kids here are on the beach in February. The gales are blowing, the rain's lashing at them. Their parents are shivering, behind the beach huts. The kids are having fun on the beach, and beach schools say there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing, and I think that's pretty accurate. So you do need to think about, but it's a complicated thing because look here, I've got a little cartoon here, I think somewhere from here. This is a Le Corvaisier cartoon, and I think it shows, this is obviously a great architect. Here was his vision of learning in the 1920s, really. It's very outdoor. The learning is organized outside, and if you look at some of the tuberculosis schools in the sort of 1910s, all the learning was outside. And then for him, this was a sort of Third Reich. This was a sort of Nazi implication coming in, where the kids are all sat in rows and given one thing to learn. And he said this is a political statement that you see, but I think it very much sums up how we lost the embedding of learning in the community and in the culture around us. Look, there's a silly example here, really, but it's a good one. We're talking a lot about Black Lives Matter and Black history and so on. We've got people saying, well, children should be taught Black history, put it in the curriculum and deliver it to them. But when I started teaching, one of the things that was left over from the 1944 Education Act was the Norwood Report, and the Norwood Report said the curriculum and the exams will be set by teachers and by their communities. And I used to teach, I taught in East London, and I was teaching this Black Studies course. You can see the Windrush coming over here from the Caribbean, with people being recruited to come and work in England, the generation at the heart of a scandal at the moment. And this curriculum was written by the local community, local families, local children. And, and it was a fabulous thing. We'd spend a lot of time out in church halls, in the high street, in people's houses, barbecues, eating food from the Caribbean and so on. And this was community learning at its best. And it was kind of reeled in. We had a Minister of Education who thought all the exams should be set from the centre. And I had to say to the parents, well, we're not going to do the exam you and the children have written anymore. We're not allowed to. And they were gobsmacked. And they said, but you know, how does anybody else know what we need to learn? Because we live here, you know. So that wasn't, I mean, I'm not that old, you know, it wasn't so long ago. And all this can reverse back, you know. And if you look at those 75-year moments of history, there was a moment when, you know, if you look at compulsory primary education in Australia, children, girls, always girls, were put in charge of teaching from 12 onwards. So if you got to 12 and you were a good enough student, you were made a teacher and you went back and you led the whole thing forward, you know. And then further down the track, suddenly somebody would come along and say, well, hang on a minute, you need teacher qualification, you need a national qualification, you know, we'll try and control this from the centre. I just think that what you've seen with COVID is communities reasserting themselves, people shopping locally, people living locally, people stopping commuting. And I think we would be foolish not to expect the same thing to happen to education. That's what I'm saying, mate. And kids will be the engine that drives this because they're in charge. They will be able to choose whether they go to that school that's delivering, or whether they go to that school that's, you know, helping them to curate their learning. And you know what they'll choose. Another question who'd like to ask something else.
I'm just wondering if we do consider the outside community in the design of a school. Let's say, for example, we have a special school being designed in Ireland at the moment around a marine theme because it's near a harbour in Dublin. So then how do we equip teachers to recognise the spatial opportunities outside of the building? That's kind of...
Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of teachers because I used to be one, you know, and I loved it. It was good fun, and it was actually good fun. It wasn't just professionally satisfying. It was enormously good fun. The best years of your life, and very occasionally the worst days, I think, is a good summary of how it feels. And I've been really impressed with how many teachers, but not all teachers, have seized the opportunity of COVID and asynchronous teaching to do something pretty special. But what you saw as people went online were two models, you know, one that said, let's take the school we've got, let's make an analog of it, let's put it online, and children have to be, you know, you've got to be at your desk at 11 o'clock and it's Mr. Smith teaching RE or whatever. Well, Mr. Smith wasn't too compelling in the classroom, let alone on the television screen, you know. So and anyway, you know, you've got two siblings and they've both got to be online at 11, and your mum's trying to hold down a 0 hours contract, so she's got to be hanging on there to see if there's work. So how the hell's that ever going to work? And we saw very high levels of exclusion and very high levels of disengagement. On the other hand, you know, people who said, well, we know how online learning works. You know, you spread it over time, you make it asynchronous, you have touch points. The touch points really matter when you come back together and sort of, but they don't all have to be at 11 o'clock. It's like, you know, from 11 till 1, we'll all be online, just pop in and say hello and off you go again. It all works, you know. So a lot of teachers, I think, have been ingenious about inventing what, you know, I've got 30 years of research of looking at online learning, and a lot of teachers in 3 weeks invented that entire 30 years very satisfactorily. And I'm in awe of how well they did it. Others just tried to reinvent the school and it didn't work, and they couldn't see that it didn't work. They wouldn't look. And but I don't kind of care really, because I know the kids are going to choose and I know what they're going to choose. So, you know, life moves on, and you know, you think you've got the perfect school. Well, Debenhams thought they had the perfect department stores. But the only problem, and they were the best department stores you could imagine. The only problem was people didn't want department stores. So, you know, life moves on, and it jolly well will move on. And our teachers are smart enough to move on with it. Half our schools will disappear, but none of our teachers will disappear. We're probably going to need more, not less, because in a world of portfolio careers, people need to study and they need to go on and keep coming back and coming back and coming back, you know. And schools are going to need their alumni, but of course their alumni are the community. You know, they haven't disappeared. They're the people down the road. They're the people in the shops where you buy your grapefruit and so on. Look, we'd better stop. I need to hand over because we could talk about this forever. But we've got Lena and Bitten, and I think Magdalena's going to take us for a bit of a walk around. So If you guys are ready to rock and roll, let's go into a real space, which is a gorgeous space, and I approve of course, because it's full of plants. So you three, take us on a tour, and thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for that thought-provoking think piece on where education seems to be heading and where schools seem to be heading and what we can do about it. I think we have meanwhile, a real responsibility of also really trying to do our best in creating those engaging environments, because things that we can do as adults, if it doesn't work for us where we work, kids are not able to do that. They can't quit their jobs as students. They do have to show up every day and do what we've sort of planned for them or with them in the best cases. So we really strive to create engaging environments and try to be like better and better at it. And more and more, I don't know whether, like, I'll just say we are based in Denmark here, and we're in a Danish countryside school, and I can't wait to show you some of what has, things that's been going on here. But before that, I'll just say that over the past maybe 10, 20 years, we've co-created more and more when we built schools, redesigned schools, mostly with teachers, which is really, really important, because it's also, it's about the learning culture you want to develop and how you can help teachers be at their best and really draw on all the research that we have and all the knowledge we have about like how learning works and what is meaningful and helpful for children. And we've got, we've particularly got our eye on the classroom, because it's where they spend so many hours, the kids, and like it's thousands, it's like maybe 11,000 hours of their time that we have them spend in like mostly in classrooms. So what do we want to do there, and how is the environment conducive to that? And so we work more and more, thankfully, also with students. More and more we see schools actually wanting to engage their students in these discussions. And I can see that there's a question from Phil in the States about how you just ideas of how do you engage your students. And there's so many ways that we do this. It could be questionnaires, it could be having them draw, think about what is ideal learning for them, having them draw or put up post-it notes and like good spaces that they really like, take pictures of favorite places in their schools, or put a lot of ideas or images of great spaces up on Instagram and have them like what they like best and see where the energy is really and what they really like. Actually recently we Bidden here next to me, who's a head teacher of this countryside school, she asked us to come down and play with all the teachers and have a look at how learning spaces or classrooms particularly should look going forward, because you want to do something about that. I'm going to show you a little video of what took place, and after that Bidden will go more into depth with the whole thing, and then we'll take a walk around one of the spaces. Good. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. Does it sound good?
In some ways, the classroom is a very sacred place for teachers. It's their room, where they have control, they make decisions. Once the students get this tiny furniture in their hands, they start prototyping, they try things out, and something changes about the way that they think. It is essential that we cater to all children and that we as schools are able to embrace diversity and the different needs of each of our learners. We design to meet very basic psychological needs. The need to feel that we are capable and competent. The need to feel that we can influence our own lives through our choices. And lastly, the need to belong and to feel like a valued member of a community, or in this case, a class. First and foremost, I hope we can change the traditional learning environments. The traditional desk, chairs, horseshoe-shaped settings, the straight rows which we see in many schools. I feel like the old classroom was just a normal little classroom, but now I feel that in some kind of a way it's gotten bigger. We don't have as many desks in the classroom, but we have more cozy nooks and more fun places. Before, we just had one desk each, a one-person desk, brip, brip, brip in rows. That wasn't very good. Traditional learning environments are very much one size fits all. But here, there's a completely different opportunity to meet each student's individual needs. This, I expect, will impact everything from well-being to academic learning and motivation. It is wonderful to experience the changes that they've made here at Søllstead Village School in almost no time at all, with very limited budget, even upcycling some of the furniture they already had. Creating environments that are this welcoming and diverse, and also, which I really like here, are co-created with the children. It really boosts the educational toolbox and provides a lot more opportunities for learning and well-being for many children. It really gives this a homey feeling. That's what the students are saying as well. One of the boys from 3rd grade says that he thinks that this little nook will give him the peace and quiet he needs to focus. When you look at the classrooms, there are these forests or green colors or other things like that, and it all creates this homey feeling and not this feeling of institution. It's actually a really nice place to be. Students spend a huge amount of hours of their life in school, so why not make it a really nice and cozy place to be? This, I think, will rub off on the teachers as well.
Good. So yeah, I hope the sound worked and all. And yeah, so I just, maybe you wondered about the boys. It's, it's a good American friend who we worked with a lot, AJ, who helped us do the voiceover so that you didn't have to listen to Danish. So I hope that was helpful. Bitten, you took a really courageous decision, a very brave one recently. So could you share with us what were the thoughts behind it and the whole process?
Hello, everybody. I started here at the school as a principal for almost a year ago, and it was a very traditional learning space, as we all know it, for 40 years ago, 40 years ago, and it was a school with a lot of possibilities, but it was a very boring learning space, and it was very institutional. So that had to change, and the classroom was one size fit all, and there was not space to the students' difference and different needs and learning style. So in the spring, I called Lene, who I know from earlier, and asked her to come and make this event for us. And then I called the Bachelor Education for Students Social Education. And they would like to come and do some learning space project with us. So they came here for 8 whole days, 40 students who was in 7 groups. My school is from the 6-year-old to the 12-year-old, and I have 7 classes. So all the students went to 7 groups and was with the students from my school. And we have created 7 unique classrooms. They're very different. Each one is unique because the involvement from the young students and the students from the social educator and from the teachers in the classroom. And the age also of the young students have an importance how the involvement was. So it is 7 very different classrooms. And we are here live from one of my favorite rooms. It's last year it was a classroom for only 14 students who was 12 years old, and the table and the chairs were placed in rows, and it was very boring, and it was crowded and no space, and it was awful. And in August, when my teachers have had this event with Lena and the rest of the team from Autens, then they were very inspired. They have played with these learning space lab designs, and the teacher in this classroom and several more went home and they started to design. And she did that. I have to show you a little picture. So I will share my screen. Just a moment. This one is how she have made it. So now there were no more rows, but then she moved a lot of the furniture. She made room to sit on the floor on a pillow, and she made zones to group work and working alone. And they had a month to experience and to use the classroom in new ways. And then these students from the social educator came, and they started to continue the redesign. And this room had a very big involvement from the students. So they started to use this design lab, and they talked a lot about how to do. And they were very good at telling what the difference was and why they placed the furnitures. And then they started to do the redesign, and the students from the school were very involved in this too. You can see they were handworkers and they were painters, and they redesigned the cover of the plants, and they make a lot of what's it called? Decoration, yes. And we ended up with this room as we are in here. The student wants nature, trees, green color, a cave, and soft places to work. So let's take a walk around. So first a view around. And over here, we have these small caves, and it was a very big furniture we found locked away, and they have made the new and made the light, and they love to sit here in their space-time and working alone, and in this small room there can sit 3 students. They love to be close. They are very fond of the trees. They found it quiet, silence. It makes them happy. And the tables are not the traditional, but with this organic forms. They really like that too. This green color. And then they love to sit over here. Just calm with the computer. Just sit and work here and be together. And they are very glad. And the teachers of this room love to be here. They find the homely. It's good to be home in this room. And the plants, I know, Stephen, for you, it's also very nice for them to have. So the result is very good, and the students love to have they influence and how they want to solve the schoolworks. They can choose for the work they have to do, if they want to sit by a table, or if they want to lay down or went outside. So it's very good.
So what's the reaction been here? What did the teachers say, and how does it work, and what difference does it make the students?
Well, the students have to think more about, I have this thing I have to do. Well, what would be good for me to do? Do I have to sit? Do I have to lay down? So they are they are moving around. They don't sit still for 7 hours. In this room, it's natural to move around. And that has to make a difference for the teachers as well, because the teachers now have to, they have to be okay with noise, because the kids just don't sit in rows and be quiet, but they are more noisy because they move around. But it's okay because it's working noise. I think the next step for me as a principal is to keep talking about these learning spaces and make them reflect about how to change their education, how to change the way they learn, because the teachers could also in a different learning space do as usual. So they have to change if you want to come all the way and make the whole difference for each student.
And I think a big point here is also that it's not a final solution. It's a tool that you continue to tweak and adjust and actually redesign over and over again, I guess, going forward. It's going to be really interesting to follow. I don't know whether our time is up. I kind of feel it might be.
You've still got a couple of minutes, Lena. You've still got a couple of minutes.
Good. So let's go. I'd like to go more into the teachers. Both the sort of like, what has this done so far to the way they work or prepare, or are they comfortable in these environments?
Yes, they are. In this classroom, that's also one of my favorite, and she is so happy. And she trusts more to the students. The students are allowed to have their own opinion about how to solve a problem, and that's new. But also I have some of the other classrooms where the teacher there finds it more difficult. It's 7 different classrooms, but it's also 14 different teachers. So someone finds it's easier to change their way than others.
Yeah.
And that's why I have to keep the process going.
Yeah, and a key point in the process that you've chosen to, like the way you've chosen to do it, is that it's centered around the needs that the kids feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's about academic benefits, and it's about well-being, and it's because of the kids, and that's the point. It's because of the kids we have to do this, and that's the point for the teachers as well, because it's for the students we are.
So maybe if we do a really good job, Stephen, they might want to come in more than 1 or 2 days a week. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important. This is not only about learning spaces, but it's about viewing of learning and child vision.
Yep. And in comparison with the old classroom, this is a much more social space. This is a space that will actually, I think, encourage friendships, and you feel more relaxed and comfortable, and you're not stuck in one place. And if you sort of have a fallout with the person next to you, you can actually make a conscious decision to move around, to go to another place, to work in a different way. So we do address the need to actually have an influence on your own life and the way you work and the way you've done things here. I'm really looking forward to see where you're going to take this, because I thought, like, this is when do you meet a head teacher who says, like, hey, we're going to empty the school completely and have the kids redesign it with some students of pedagogy that we bring in, And well, this is actually what you did, and I know your teachers love you.
Still.
Yeah, but yeah, so really congratulations.
But it was hard for the teachers because the classroom is their own. So some of them find it very difficult and scary, but they are still happy, everyone. So
thank you.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time, Liz?
You are now ready for questions.
We are. We certainly are. Yep. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
We'll switch to the other computer again. Somebody asked if we could share the YouTube link. We will do that. I think we'll do it a little bit later in the meeting. We'll get around to fixing that.
Thank you.
So what do you think? Any feedback?
I have a question, if that's okay. I was just wondering, I understand. Can you hear me okay?
Now we can.
When it comes to the new arrangement of the classrooms, because there are loads of little kind of intricate spaces where the children can kind of go away and hide, which it can often be a positive, but it can also sometimes bring on bullying. Do you ever find that there's an issue with children having issues with each other because they're hidden away from the teacher? Or do you find that actually, because it's more of a calming environment, you're having less of those situations that you normally would get in the playground?
Can I just start off? Yeah, and you can think about it. I think this is an issue. Like in Denmark, we typically address it in a different way. We don't see it as a challenge necessarily that we have a cave space or a little nook where kids can hide. We're not, it's not typically places for bullying or such when it's in your sort of near either primary or nearby learning environment where you are. And in case of this classroom, you're not going to. I don't think it's an issue with bullying if you go hide there and a couple of kids.
And we also have in all 7 classrooms, there could be students with some kind of diagnosis, so they have to have their own space, and of course they can still have that. So even though all the students have different ways to be, then there are also these unique kinds of, we also take care of the students who have other needs, so they can still have their own space to be.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And just to add a little bit to that, I think it's an integral part of school here in Denmark or Scandinavia, such that we work on building the class community and talking about well-being and talking about being good friends and how we are with each other, and that we are actually trying to build good relationships between kids in the class. And we also talk about when that's not the case. So we address it and actually work very sort of intensively when there are problems like that. So we really try to build a culture of inclusion, and which this is also reflecting, so that we do have different needs, we're different people, and the spaces here reflect that.
I guess the feeling of well-being overall impacts the children anyway, because when you're stuck in a classroom all facing forward with high CO2 levels, that's going to affect how a child reacts with another child. And if you've got a surrounding the way you've done it, which is really, really interesting, because you've made it a biophilic environment without leaving the classroom, you automatically calm children. So yeah, it's really cool. Thank you.
I'm going to hand over to one of the most inspiring educators that I know, and a very dear friend who can definitely share a few more tricks on how to create a school that's really engaging and inspirational, and that will have your kids really die to come every day. So Rob, over to you, and let's hear a bit about Agora School and your recent project as well. But let's start out by hearing about Agora School and what it is, what your philosophy is. And thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lene. What an announcement. High hopes. So a bit of pressure now. So what I first would love to do is, well, first of all, I would like to go into, I don't know if you realized it, but Bitten got a question about bullying kids and how kids bully amongst each other. And then Stephen took that question also. And so Bitten, first of all, you explained that in that environment you can have a lot of overview on if there would be a situation when kids are bullying. I think we have to create bully spots in the schools, because then we can give guidance to kids who are bullying, because otherwise we would never discover it and we could never give them guidance. So that was a nice piece of the answer I heard from Bitten. And then Stephen went on and he explained to us that the kids aren't bullying, but the schools are bullying. And that's what we should focus on. How are we as schools bullying kids? And I think we've made a system out of that. And that gives us a big problem. And that's that we have to police all of this. And we have to medicate kids. And we don't give them situations to escape from the school bullying. No, they have to stay in the marked class. And they have to listen to the teacher all day long. But if you have to listen to the teacher all day long at your working environment, you wouldn't be working there, would you? So, so I've liked that piece of the conversation. But well, as Lana said, I want to tell you a little bit about, or I was asked to tell you a little bit about Agora, and so I want to share some slides with you, so I can also give you a visual, because at the moment I'm sitting at my attic at home, and because, well, school is closed this week, not because of the virus, but because of the holidays. So I'm first going to try to share my screen. Of course, I've done it a million times, but I'm always insecure about it. So that's why I'm saying I try to share it. And yes, I think you're seeing my slides now. And if not, somebody please shout out. Yeah, that means, well, yep. Great, thank you. So what you see at the moment is the front of our school, and it's in Roermond, and Roermond, it's in the Netherlands. It's like 50k above Maastricht, so in the smallest part of the narrowest part of the Netherlands. And what I tell to all my visitors at our school is that they should forget about teaching, and it has something to do with bullying, and should start with what you really know about learning. And that's why I tell this to everybody who enters the building. But first of all, I should tell you a little bit about Agora, and we get into this sentence later on. So first of all, Agora is a government-funded public secondary school. So we have kids from the age of 12 up until 18, and some of them are 19. And at Agora, we learn students to manage their own learning process. And we do this without courses, without classes, without class timetables or age groups or levels or whatever. We learn them to set and achieve their own goals and their own challenges. And when students start at Agora, we just ask them, what do you want to make, do, or learn? And whatever the answer is, we go from there. And we always hope that it is make, because if they want to make something, we are sure they are going to do something, and we also are sure they're going to learn something. So what we try to do is figure out the kids' talents, interests, and ambitions. So, and then towards that building and towards that, our vision of a school. At Agora, we believe that a school has to be a good mix between Harvard University, a place where you can access all the knowledge in the world. Well, that's quite easy these days. We have the internet, and all the kids have their mobile phones, so everybody can access the internet as well. We just have to explain them how to do all of this and give them guidance. Second of all, we think it has to be something like a Buddhist monastery, not because we are religious, but we have to give the kids the feeling that they are at ease at school. We also believe that it should be a creative laboratory, a place where you have the feeling and can create and make effort, from a go-kart, a robot, to a nice sweater or pants or whatever. Of course, our school should be like a marketplace. That's why we called it Agora, because Agora is, it translates from Old Greek into marketplace. And we see this old Greek marketplace. We see that place where people are debating, interacting, where they see new things, see their first monkey or orange or whatever, where they get inspiration by others, but also a place where you can inspire others. And last but not least, it has to feel like Disneyland, where there is kind staff around you and wants to assist you in any way. And when you look around, you get this happy and amazed feeling and want to join everything that's around you. And that's why our main atrium in the school looks like this. It's a place where all the people who work there trust in the fact that children want to learn. And if we doubt this fact, well, we're simply selling them short. And that's not only, this sentence is not only for students, but of course it's also for staff. All staff also wants to learn. So there aren't any people who don't want to learn, but there are people who don't want to learn what you want to tell them. And that's our problem and not theirs. So we don't have any classrooms. We have rooms like this where people and students make their own learning spaces and their own tables. Because at least at school, children should be happy, despite what's going on in the rest of their lives, of course. And even during the coronavirus start in April and May, of course, at first we had to send everybody home, but then in the Netherlands, we were able to get like 30–40% of the people back into the school. Even then, we tried to make, I hear a lot of sounds from somebody else. I don't know if it bothers you, but for me, it's a bit strange. So even then, we tried to make it look like a happy place. And what you see here is all individual desks, which we cleaned every day because of the virus and put people's stuff in there. So this is one of the other rooms also. It's in that same time period when we couldn't have all the kids in. And as you see at Agora, all our kids have their own desks. This was during the virus, so the amount of chairs and stuff in this room is less than normal, but they all try to make their own nice learning spaces out of that. And why do we do that? Because, well, we want them to feel happy and amazed and everything I was talking about before, but we also want them to take up their own challenges, because that's what the main goal at Agora is, that you tell us what you want to make, do, or learn, and we make a challenge out of that. So one of our school kids, Kato, she decided to want to make a skateboard. And this is a recent video of her. I've taken the sound out of it because I don't have a nice American friend to just subtitle it for me. But what Kato is telling you about at the moment is how she developed this skateboard. And she's telling us even what is the best wood sort or best wood to make a skateboard. And that if you want to make a skateboard, you have to put wood in water. And the first day she did that, she put all the wood in the water, and she came back the day after to school, and she was surprised that the wood wasn't bent in the form of a skateboard. So then she learned that you also have to put the wood in a mold. Just making it wet is not enough. After that, she learned how to glue different pieces of that wood together, and how you make that edge really nice by putting extra glue and little pieces of wood in there. She even found out, she went on the internet and tried to buy the cheapest wheels possible. So she bought them secondhand because she said it's going to be my skateboard. The school doesn't have to pay for that. And well, we love that of course as well, because she was very money aware of the project. She also learned to, and I don't know if you can see it properly, but she's pointing at it now. She also learned that she couldn't put these wheels straight onto the wood. So what she did is she learned how to 3D print that piece of thing, that plastic thing that is sitting in between the wheels and the wood. And then, of course, she learned to engrave the skateboard, and she used our laser printer for that. So this is a girl, 13 years old, who just wanted to make a skateboard. And what she's capable now is laser cutting, 3D printing, bending wood, knowing wood. So she knows what type of wood this is. And she's very proud, and she's skateboarding it to school every day now. And that's what we are up to. We think that we have to put kids into situations that they astun us, but also astun themselves. And we have to give them the circumstances that basis of confidence, inspiration, and challenged, and to be challenged. That's also a very important one. So challenged for us means that we put you in a situation you on forehand think that you can't handle, but we will help you, and we will get the confidence and the inspiration to get you there. So our kids at our school, they customize everything. The boys on the top even used the front of a car to make a desk out of it. The girl on the right lower part, she's used wood and carpentry to make this thing around her desk. The boys on the left, well, they are runners, so they have to make something with wheels, of course. We don't care as long as they are making and creating. And most of the people, when I get this far in my presentation, they get thinking like, but don't you have to do any courses and lectures and stuff like that? Yes, of course we do. We are an official public secondary school. So we have to obey the law. These kids do national exams at the end. They get a national diploma as well. But the way to get there isn't built up out of courses. It's built up out of experiences and it's about challenges. And we do it that way because it sticks to them. They just remember it. I've been a mathematics teacher my whole life, and I've explained Pythagoras like 1,000,000 times. And only in the year before the national exams, kids get it and remember it for more than half a year. And that's because they really need it. What if you need it when you when you want to build something great? Then I only have to explain you once. And in the past, I was explaining it every year in, year out. So, of course, we do this because school should be a place where we give them this basis to be confident, inspired, and challenged, and has to feel like at home. And I think now with the recent project we've done, and there was a couple of hinting towards that, is that we've taken a bit up a notch, because up until now we were doing challenges for personal use or for bigger groups. I have some kids who had a challenge to build our own learning environment, digital learning environment. They did that because they wanted to do something for the school. And now we believe more and more that we shouldn't only be a school for students, but we should also be a school with and run by students. And one of the examples is this new space we have. And so this is our main atrium, but when you look to the right through the windows, you can see in the new space, and we are developing this at the moment, so it isn't finished yet, but you can see like the half product. I've went up to some of our students and I invited them. I invited lots of the students, but not all of them turn up, of course, when you invite them, to think about a way to promote technical skills in our school, to get our kids more in the doing mode, even more. And we came up with this room in which kids can connect with technology by taking off their shoes, because at first they have to experience that technology doesn't have to be dirty work. And as you see, it's work in process because the kids are building this room. This video is from last Friday. And if you were looking in this room 2 weeks ago, it was empty. But what are you seeing here? What you see on the floor is one of the projects or challenges I took up with 6 kids. And I asked kids who loves to draw, and like 15 kids told us, well, I love to draw. And they came up and we started this project because I've asked them to create a floor that would amaze everybody. And these kids connected with a company, and I will tell you a little bit more about it later. So from that space next door where you have clean technology, where there will be robotics in there and Lego and Arduino and stuff, we try to suck them through the windows into this room where they can really, really, really get their hands dirty and build stuff. And we see great stuff there. But back to those kids and back to the floor. The first thing we did in this new room was asking kids, how should it look like? And so they came up with this idea about coziness. You should be able to climb on stuff. You should have everything we can use. We should be able to grab ourselves. So we don't want any lockers behind. We don't want anything behind doors, because if there is something behind the wooden door, we can't see it. And if you can't see it, you can't get the idea to use it. So we also have this. They also wanted a wet space. You see that to the right here, where they can do painting and stuff like that. And then here they go into the robotics part and the design part, but there will also be a sewing piece here. So they can do knitting and stuff like that, work with fabrics. And if you look to these windows on the right here, there will be designing, and they will be able to print and stuff whatever they want, do videos and stuff like that. So we had 10 kids deciding on what should be in this room and what should be in the 2 rooms next to this. But after that, these kids said it would be great if we have a special carpet. So we asked other kids to design the floor, and they designed it together, and they made a lot of tests out of it. And then they came up with the idea that there should be running lava towards where you can get your hand dirty. And towards the other side, there should be a water flow, because that's the clean part of the school. And we took this up, and these kids started designing. And we found a company who said, well, we can make any carpet you want, but because it's for a school and it's such a great product, we want to build it with you together. And of course, they have never done a project like that. And they gave us a big discount, of course, because otherwise we would never be able to pay for a floor like that. But the cool thing is that they invited us to their company. So these are these kids who are on this mission to develop this floor. And what you can see here is that they did every piece of the process. So at this moment, they took their drawing, how they made it, how the floor should look like. They took it to the factory, and they were looking up what colors should be in there. And that was a big of a problem, because they get like 2 baskets like you see over there. And they had to choose 12 colors, because they can only print 12 colors. So they got all of the process with all ups and downs. Well, now they feel like they own the building, you know, especially when they got the flooring in. Well, the same thing is with all the wooden material that you saw in the space. Of course, we contacted a local carpenter if he could make it. But I went for a carpenter. We said, I can make it, but wouldn't it be better if I make it with students? And that's what we've did. We made this space, we built it up with students. You see the carpet here on the floor, the kids designed. You saw the kid who was building it. You see 2 kids here who are painting it. So it's not our school, it's their school. And they should be in the design process, but also in the taking care process. And by that, they get lots and lots of ownership. And we do that in well, I already get these. We do that with lots of things. So for instance, this 3D printer, it looks like a regular printer, but it's not. All the black you see in here is wood, and all the orange you see here is 3D printed with another 3D printer. And the first 3D printer we got into the school was one which was a building project. So kids had to build that 3D printer. We just put the box in the room and said, you ordered a 3D printer, there it is. And the kid said, why? We still have to unbox it. Yes, of course, unbox it. But it has to be built. Yeah, you can do it. And that's how we try to get kids into our building, working. And what of course I need to tell you is that, well, then you see situations like this, kids helping among each other in the building, playing games, of course, but also challenging themselves by doing some cooking, inviting guests over. This is a local entrepreneur, but also building escape rooms to get other kids into mathematics. giving lectures. If you look at the back of these kids, you see police officers who are getting lectures at our school by kids, how they do their job at our school. We don't give lectures. Kids give lectures about what they've learned to other kids. Kids from other school who are interested in our school come and do the same thing. Teachers from other schools, even from Teachers College, come over to experiment and see how you work with kids. We don't give a lot of cooking lessons. Parents and people from the neighborhood come and do that with our kids. These kids wanted to do something for charity and asked one of the parents if they could give her guidance and make products for that. This is our the head of this is the financial guy of the school board explaining these kids what the financial situation of our whole district is. So that's how we try to collaborate with kids to get them into running a school as well. And they can do that, of course, online as well. This is also one of the projects. He wanted to learn how to make this video. And so we invite a lot of people into our school to collaborate with the kids to make great, astonishing things. And so that's what I wanted to tell you just for now. So that's how we try to get people into forgetting about teaching and how schools are organized, but start with what you really know about learning. And just to wrap things up, I only have to add one thing. I'm a strong believer that most of the things you can and want to learn, you should learn outside the school building. The school building isn't the best place to learn. Real learning happens outside with professionals in a certain area. But what we as schools have to make sure is that kids get there and are prepared to ask the right questions there. And that's why I need this technical environment, but it shouldn't be too heavy, because the really heavy stuff should be with somebody who really knows what he's talking about. And that's not us.
Rob, that was terrific.
Yep.
Stuff. And I was enjoying the irony actually of building a school that looks like home and is full of people from the local community, and you built a school that isn't a school, and I'm thinking, well, I think that is a community. It's a really, I think it just adds to what we were saying at the beginning about softer, lower walls and learning escaping from the prison we put it in. So thanks for that. I adore your building. I always worry about that gold cage swinging from the ceiling. Terrified.
Yeah, we have to figure out a new name for it, because the problem at the moment is that we have to say school, because otherwise nobody knows what we're talking about. But we also see it as a community thing.
Yeah, exactly is. And I think if you look at the demography of all this, for sure, it's a community learning resource. I hold in the university, I hold the Felipe Segovia Chair in Learning Innovation, and Felipe Segovia would say often that it's no good finishing school having learned. You've got to finish school with a passion for learning to take forward, and learning how to learn is probably the most important thing. So a few closing thoughts really, and then back to Terry for what's been a cracking afternoon, I think. First of all, I thought you'd enjoy this image from, this is from our SEK schools in Spain, where we've done, as many of you have done really, we've kind of built a learner-led project. The kids have designed their own learning space, and they've prototyped it, and as everybody said, it doesn't need a lot of money to do this, and if it did need a lot of money, there's a moral imperative that says we should do it cheaper anyway, because the rest of the world doesn't have a lot of money. And I just love this sign the kids put on the door that it says Classroom of Tomorrow, and it says created by children for children, which I think is it's just adorable there. But I love the fact that it's in English as well as Spanish, because they're very conscious of a world watching what they're doing. And I like this, which is from this is our learning lab in UCJC, and I'll give you the link to a walk around of this, but this was a really interesting space designed initially with children who'd made over their own learning space in their schools over some years. And we called in some of them and said, if you would design if you were to design a university that you wanted to go to, what would it look like? And I love this picture because the space itself is inspirational, but what you can see just here are, you know, little tiny children doing a sort of a CPD input for university lecturers and students, and sort of saying, well, this is how a Harkness table works, and this is the way that the Skype bars work, and all the little details that the kids with the students have put into the building, and now leading the charge on this is how you use it. And I wanted you to, you know, and this is the space, by the way. I mean, it's a lovely, it's a fabulous, light, gorgeous, seductive space. But I wanted to reflect on the breadth of all this a bit as well, because a really good theme from all this has been, you know, learning escaping. And this is, we also do learning for elite sports. And I think this is really interesting because in England, certainly in Britain, we didn't used to be very good at sports, to be honest. You know, we didn't win very many gold medals and so on. And then suddenly, you know, we got some lottery funding, and people started looking at the details. And what I love about this is a learning space for, which I did with James Clark, who, by the way, is online here, I think, somewhere at Space Oasis. So track him down. But this is the Team GB hockey girls team, so it's the same space for the boys. And you know, it looks like nothing more than a state-of-the-art primary classroom, does it? You've got tiered seating, you've got people sitting focused on the learning, the walls are all writable, you've got little artifacts, little avatars on the floor, because we know physically that picking things up and moving them, hot wires them into the brain, there is a time for direct contact, and it's here. The coach, the teacher, if you like, sitting here, has had, this is a taught pedagogy you're observing, because he's put his hands in his pockets and stood back, having introduced the question, because otherwise he'll be waving his arms around and doing, you know, teaching sort of things. So, you know, this is great primary teaching. But by the way, that team went on to win a gold medal in Rio, partly on the basis of their set pieces. So it's pretty exciting, all this. You know, learning turns out to be lifelong. Learning turns out to be community-wide. And learning turns out to have some more components as well. One of the things we've been doing in Madrid is this. So let me just turn off the background. Is this? We've been looking at the food that you eat. What are the best foods for learning? You know, we put kids in school. We feed them ghastly things. We've had a number of political campaigns. There's one running at the moment from a lead footballer to make sure children have a sensible diet. But nobody said, what's the impact of the food on your brain, on your ability to perform at your best? And what came out of this that was fascinating was that obviously the children loved the whole work. You know, there's a sort of literature survey that says, here are some of the ingredients that we know are good for your brain, and you know, good news, there's avocado and chocolate, you know, are on there. It's not all kimchi and turmeric, you know. They loved sourcing recipes and sharing the recipes. They have a YouTube channel, of course. They loved eating food that they knew was sharpening their intellectual performance. And where children had shown really very little interest in well-being with their food, you know, yeah, well-being, yeah, give me another burger, you know. When they were thinking about the impact of the food on their cognitive processes, they were all over it. And we had, I remember a parent phoned in and said that daughter had come home, you know, having barely eaten anything green for the last 5 years and thrown half the fridge away and started demanding that they bought proper food. So that was interesting enough. But then the kitchen staff from Carter Hest, who are the people who do our catering, suddenly arrived at meetings in clean white coats with clipboards and notes. Having done a lot of research, it turned out they absolutely loved being researchers, not being caterers trying to fill the stomachs of the kids, but being researchers trying to optimize the brains of their children. So everybody in this game wants learning to be the best it can possibly be. And Philip, asked, and it's taken me like an hour to get back to the question Philip. But Philip asked, you know, what sort of survey data have we got back? And obviously lots, sitting on about 7 million hours of online data at the moment. But in the very early days, Philip, we asked 1,000 people and then another 1,000, what were their best learning experiences? And, you know, that was 1996. So here we are, you know, a quarter of a century on, and it's interesting to rehearse what those great learning experiences were, because people were always doing something difficult. There was an ipsative referencing, yeah, it's really hard. I'm really proud to have done that. They always did it with others. It was always collaborative. And you can feel the mismatch between that and what's happening in many schools. And you can see how important collaboration has been in both the schools that we've looked around, you know, virtually today. They always had an audience for their work. And the audience was more than somebody just glancing through their coursework or their textbook. You know, they wanted to show to the world, and here we are with technology that we can all talk together across the world, and children should be having that for their audience, shouldn't they? Of course, during the COVID thing, they did, and that genie's out of the bottle, they won't go back. But the thing I loved most was that they all reflected on the fact that their teachers, their leaders, their coaches, their parents, whoever was leading their learning, was a little bit crazy. They loved to be led by somebody who was, you know, a little bit mad about poetry, who was, you know, passionate about physical geography, or, you know, really their face lit up when they said they were going to do some 3D printing. They were looking for eccentricity and passion. And I think if you take all of that, eccentricity, passion, doing it with others, having an audience for what you're learning, feeling that it was really hard and achieving it, not being held back, you know, you can't do that till next year, you've got to wait a bit, just being able to go as far and as fast as you like. And that's stage, not age learning. You know, you had 25 years ago, you had a blueprint for how good learning could be. So we've known a lot of this for a long time. I'm left, I think, with the vision of, in the town here, little town really, the man who used to cut my hair, I can't go there anymore because of the pandemic, you know, but he used to cut my hair. He has a pole outside with a white pole with a red spiral around it. And that used to represent the bleeding job that barbers did medically. You know, if you were feeling a bit ill, you'd go to the barber and they would cut you here or cut you there or cut you in the groin or goodness knows where and bleed you, you know, until you recovered. And even when it was very apparent that none of this was working, because the KPI, by the way, was how many times were you bled, not did you live, you know. So even when the KPI was quite clearly the wrong thing and people were dying, barbers kept on doing it because it was their job. And then over here, somebody discovered hygiene and medicine, and that was all moving fast. And eventually hospitals and doctors got on with that, and the barber was left still with that set of sharp knives, doing nothing but trimming beards and cutting hair. I think that's where we are with education. I think there are people out there who are still bleeding their kids, and there are people out there who've discovered the science of making their minds, their delight in learning, their joy of learning better. You've heard from some of those folk today, and I am not worried that, you know, if we'd been having this conversation 20 years ago, we'd have all thought, well, we've seen schools that burn brightly and then get swallowed up again. I'm not worried anymore about that, because I've seen the children's eyes when they're in those learning spaces. I've seen their passion when they tell people about them. And as we really go to Terry's closing remarks, I'll leave you with this lovely little comment from just the other day from the pandemic, you know, and kids rushing out of school to see their parents, and their parents saying how much they've missed their children and they've missed learning with their children, and kids rushing into school anxious, as my granddaughter was just today, clutching her sailing results from the weekend, anxious to tell her teacher about all the learning she's been doing outside. you know, suddenly this great learning family has got some really exciting places to go. And I think we're in for the best decade of our lives. But woe betide those schools that are going to be shut down because the kids didn't want to go to them. And hang on to what I said, that's going to be about half of them. Half of them. Now leave yourself thinking about, that's not the disaster it sounds like. Because if I go out to Pakistan where there's 25 million children who would love to go to school, have no schools, have no teachers, or if I go to northern Nigeria where the kids would love to go to school, but if you build anything that looks like a school, Boko Haram will come through the door and tear the heart out of it, and tear the heart out of the teachers as well. Those kids need an alternative. And with Lise, you know, we've been talking to ministers of education all around the world over the last 6 months. I think 103 ministers now. That's a huge number of politicians. I don't have a collective now, something ghastly, I think. But it's very clear from that the places that are running fastest, the places who will look at what you've been seeing today and say, oh, we can learn from that. The places that are moving quickest are the places with nothing to lose. You know, it's the Philippines, it's West Africa. They've got no legacy system. They've got nothing that worked well in the past. They've got a few pretend Western schools that don't work very well because they had no money. Those are going to be the front.
Stephen, I need to probably cut in on you now. Stephen?
So I've finished, that's it.
Okay, good. No, thank you. Okay, can I just say some closing points, please? And I am, Stephen knows me to be an optimist in all these things. We wouldn't have worked and shared stuff together over many years if I wasn't. And I do think, you know, my point earlier, I'd like us to think about not 21st century learning, but the fact we're living in the 21st century and we are a fifth of the way through it. And so although I'm optimistic as Stephen is that you know, we're on a change route, I think that the reality every day is that there are areas where people need support and help to try to move an agenda on that they have, that they want support and help around to do. And I think if one of the reasons for wanting to do this is to bring people together that can be like-minded, that can start to get more systemic activity taking place by sharing and contributing and demonstrating that actually, you know, if we do really value young people as part of this process and we value them actually meaningfully, not in a tokenistic way, it pays off, it has value, and it can make a real difference. And I think that through the Association of Learning Environments, I believe everybody from a different perspective, from a different discipline, has a part to play in that. And I think at the moment, there needs to be a better cross-professional focus on what some of the things are that people are doing today. Many of the questions that have come up are about how can this be done in this country? How can that be done? You know, what are the challenges? And they're all different in every culture, in every way. But fundamentally believe underneath all that, you know, it's if we believe that young people are basically not consumers, but we create with them what we're trying to do, and we develop processes and systems to help that, then some of these sparkling, glimmering things and some of these things that are working will grow, become a little more systemic, and will impact on change. And so really, from the point of view of A4LE, a couple of things to leave you with. You know, how can we collectively shine the light on those things that are working well? How can we work from different perspectives to actually gather around that idea that young people do matter and meaningfully matter? And how can we translate that into our daily activities? So I'm aware that, you know, and I'm completely for the idea that we're going to be looking outside, and learning environments outside are critical. Staying local and working in local communities, absolutely critical. Looking at co-educators, as many people are, critically important, and will become more so. And technology will help us blend learning for whatever that's defined to be. But I guess my point here is that I think we need to start to think then, if that's the case, what will future schools really need to look like in order to manage those things we can't do elsewhere, but manage the critical things that school needs to do to reach out and be different. And I think for me, there are some design options in the way we organize and size up and create our new schools or our new places that might be for learning that actually will help the current system cope because a lot of the schools will not wait to be different of the outside. They'll need to be remodeled. So my plea here is, how can we think differently about those important learning experiences that we're having outside of school that could be in school? And as designers, how might you achieve that? And a point in England over many years, we were always told, make schools adaptable, make them flexible. Well, actually, the idea behind that was very much make them adaptable on the old model. If we were now thinking about adaptability for what a school in this century needs to look like, it may be a range of open spaces that connect to the community, that kids in local communities can walk into, and the spaces can be reconfigured and can be evolved with teams of staff and young people within a design environment. It could be a very different shape and a very different size. So I think my ask would be, in thinking about what's happened today and we've shared today, I feel it's been a great start. And I would just like to ask everyone that's been involved, are there ways we can come together a little more from different disciplines in different ways and actually make this a much more collaborative agenda so we can achieve more from whether that is from an educator, a researcher, a designer, an architect, an administrator, a teacher? And how can we link up these amazing examples we've seen today, bring them together and synthesize some of the learning points that others could use as they start to go forward? And I think if we can find a way of galvanizing that and bringing it together and promoting that, I think that would be a very good thing to do. And I would like to ask you, when you reflect on this over the next couple of days, if there are ways that you can suggest that we can create the next event that might bring that together or might be hosted in different places that can be added to, but something then that people can use and reflect on, I think we will start to help people to move their way forward. And like Stephen, I'm optimistic. I think it will eventually, especially from the UK's perspective, get through to some of our politicians who I would dare to say have more thinking about protecting the old than actually developing, living in this 21st century as a new thing. So I basically would like to say that as a way to close and to thank everybody. The other thing is that we will, if you want us to email you the links to this and all the things we've said today, we can do that. We just need to have your emails and the ability to get back to you. I think we have everybody's email. Also, as Lisa said at the beginning, we will be recording, it has been recorded, and we will be putting that out and getting that back to you. So I think that's really my closure on that. Then could I just ask, Lena, would you like to add anything to that? And Bitten, would you like to add anything quickly before we hold Rob and then move on?
Thank you, Terry. You wrapped it up nicely. So that I don't have anything to add at this point, other than it's been totally inspirational, and I'd love for all of us to really discuss these things going forward and see more examples.
Okay, and Rob?
Oh, I agree with Lena.
But are there ways that you feel that we could create some other links? Because I think the focus for this has brought a lot of people in, and I think for me, time is precious. We've got things with kids to do, and I think that trying to find ways of putting something to people that has value and is applied and meaningful is a really important thing, because I think people will give up time for that, because we're talking about young people and their future and how to work with them. And I think it's been an outstanding. I wondered whether you felt there are other ways that we could move this on.
Yeah, well, I get I would almost say a million questions about Agora, and people asking, can you share more, and can you do this, and can you do that? And the most troubling with all of this is that when you start something like this, you're just a small school, and we have to figure out a way that we as a school we shouldn't be confronted with how do I say this in proper English? It shouldn't be our job to shout it out what we are doing. I think there are a lot of people in the world at the moment who definitely want to hear about us, and I encourage all of them, help me figure out a way how we don't have to shout out ourselves what we are doing, because we are talking to kids every day, that's our main job. And so I'm looking to collaborate with a lot of people. For instance, the 100 organization who made a nice website of our Agora thing, to get that message out. But don't ask us to do it every time again and again and again. So I think that's a very difficult situation in which I think it should also be a part of, we should reflect on how people are researching education, for instance. And what are they researching? And are they doing a research that helps us in this situation, or are they researching something they want to do for themselves? We should find more ways to be supportive as education as a whole.
Thank you, and I do take that point, because it's a load on everybody, and we need to find a smart way of doing that. So, Stephen, thank you for hosting that through, and Lise for holding that all together. Can I thank everybody, and we'll be back in touch. Any feedback on this, please give it to us.
I'm just going to say, I just need to say one thing really, which you said thank you to Lise for making all this work seamlessly. I need to say thank you to you for pulling all this together and making it all happen. So thanks for that. We wouldn't be here without Lise. So she's done heroic stuff. And my thought for you also is, and I love the walkthroughs. I think they were terrific, curated, narrated walkthroughs. We could have 1,000 of them. It'd all be interesting. Our challenge, I think, is how do we include the children in this at this level, and where's their voice and where are they? And I think that's an important reflection. But it's been a cracking afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.